Okay, then we'll call the meeting to order. 6:31. Could I get a motion to enter public session?
I'll make a motion in public session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're in public session. Could I get a roll call?
Jessica?
Here.
Mr. Menands?
Here.
Mr. Wu?
Here.
Ms. Shea?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Correct.
You stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is comments from the public on agenda items. Just a reminder for the members of the public in attendance, this is one of two opportunities afforded to members of the public to comment on or inquire about agenda items. Members of the public will also have an opportunity at the end of the evening's agenda to ask questions or voice concerns or comment on matters not formally noted on the agenda. Anyone in person have anything? Okay, anyone online? Email comments can be submitted to BOE comments@menands.org. Is there anyone watching online? Okay. And an off day, so. Pay attention. Okay, that takes us to personnel matters. Why don't we get a resolution first and then I'll see if anyone. Did everyone see that the resumes were attached and need a minute for the program?
No.
All right, could I get a resolution, please?
Be resolved that the Board of Education of the Menands Unified School District approves the updated personnel agenda items as attached. Instructional appointment is Nicole Lensowitz, long-term substitute. Non-instructional appointment, Raymond Drexel, social worker. Someone should second that.
Second. Sorry.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I know that we have Raymond with us tonight, a social worker, so welcome. Welcome to Menands School.
There you go.
We're happy to have you. Thanks so much for coming in, introducing yourself, and welcome.
So Raymond, and you had a chance to look at his resume. He's coming to us from Cluster 3 BOCES. He has spent a couple of years working with students primarily with social emotional disabilities. Before that, he has spent some time in the private sector, both in the hospital system. He actually knew our previous social worker, along with Ned, and then he has spent some time in prisons and then a public school before that. So he brings to us a wealth of knowledge. We're excited to have him start. We're unsure if we're going to find a qualified and exceptional candidate this year. So we're happy to welcome Raymond, and he will start with us on February 26th.
Sounds great. Looking forward
And then I'm not sure if Nicole was the lead, just what happened, but Nicole is going to be a long-term lead. She comes to us from Spotted Zebra, and she'll be filling our kindergarten position. Her and Ms. Trainer will spend some time together, and we are excited to have her come. She's a recent graduate from St. Rose. She just graduated back in December. So we have two great people coming on board with us. We're excited.
Can you remind me for long-term substitute, is she, if needed, is she able to cover for the rest of the school year, or is there a time limit on it?
No, she's going to be appointed for the full semester. She's here for the remainder of the school year. Being that it's a full semester, she is able to access the teachers' union benefits. That was one of the next pieces of finding somebody at the end of January, being able to offer the step one salary along with benefits, often just attracts a higher quality candidate. So, yep, she's with us until the end of the school year.
Great.
I know she's not here, but welcome to. Nicole, I'm sure will be here soon. And I think that was it, short agenda tonight. So we're at our next public comment session. Members of the community may address the board on non-agenda items. I think that's it. Does anyone have anything to do before? We don't have a 48 time, but I want to ask you the time and we're going to process this out. Okay.
We are working with side companies, nothing come out. We've tried to go like turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah.
I did at the church before we called her and asked you to turn it off and turn it on. So we've done that. The church is working to connect with the sign company.
Okay. Is there a warranty? You haven't had it that long. You get it with see what happens when you call them.
Yes, it is. They were out last summer doing some work on it. It's been a little bit of an ongoing thing, but we will work with them a little bit more. And we'll look at what they fixed last summer too, to see if that aligns. I feel like the rest were moving parents before,
Oh, really? Okay.
I may be making that up, but I feel like that was a thing last year too.
I know miscellaneous is not here, but does anyone else have anything they want to share or ask about before we adjourn and get to the budget? No? Okay, then can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? All right, we are adjourned for our budget hearing. Everyone, including Brandon, is welcome to stay and listen to the budget hearing if you want to. We won't take further action. You don't have to stay, but you're certainly welcome to listen and what we're talking about the upcoming year if you.
Right, feel free without judgment if you'd like to volunteer.
Right.
And I genuinely mean that. Absolutely.
No.
More than welcome to stay, but there's, congratulations, we're welcome to have you. You can take the paperwork if you want to take a look.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate that. Not every guy, but.
Totally fine. I'm just like- Is the, I guess I didn't notice it wasn't in here, is it on the budget presentation somewhere on the web, like on the budget? If not, we could just add it later, but.
Board docs are on the website.
On the website,
Yeah, it'll be linked,
and the budget is actually linked. Okay, all right, great, thank you.
There's something going on. So Everybody had all kinds of delays on, internet access. I had some people calling me, they're waiting for like minutes for screens to change over and over it.
Okay.
I'm done. I was trying to tell you.
No, you have to live on it. Okay, I'll stay up here so I don't block anybody.
I was just shaker. High school time.
Wires. That was not made for a great first workshop. Okay. All right, thank you. Joanne and I have been working over the last week or two to get a sense of, our first budget workshop presentation for you and for the public. Tonight, Joanne will chime in and do a couple of slides with me. But, we wanted to start this evening just with our district goals. Our district goals guide the work that we do, they guide the budget process, and they really identify our priorities for us as we move forward. Our goals around student achievement, social emotional learning, our DEI work, and our fiscal responsibility are something that we're working on throughout the course of the school year. And it's something that as we talk about what's important to us, what is something we would like to have versus something we need to have, our goals are a good place for us to refer and take a look at to help guide some of that decision making. So over the course of our last budget season, for student achievement and success, the board has continued to support the role of the instructional coach that we have with Ms. Trainer, our embedded staff developer. And she has been working very closely with teachers around instructional practices and curriculum work. For social emotional learning, we continue to support our teachers in responsive classroom training. Any new hire that comes on is required to go through the training at district expense. It's a 4-day training. It's a pretty large commitment, but it is something that we feel is important for our students and really is at the core of the social emotional work that we do with our students each day. We continued our work in DEI this past school year, specifically with Roseanne Bain. She's done quite a bit of work with us around data, bias, and really making sure that we have a welcoming and affirming environment. And that is also coupled with the restorative practices work that we've done. And I would say that the restorative practices work leads throughout all 3 goals. So we continue that work, and we have plans to continue that work moving ahead. And then last but not least, even as we plan our budget, we look at our fiscal responsibility goal, but that's something that we look at over the course of the year. Equipment replacement plans, keeping our building and grounds up to date, and really trying to get ahead of things before they become a bigger problem. So as we go through the presentation tonight, I would ask you to keep those 4 goals in mind, and they will help guide the work that we put together this evening. So as we begin to build a budget, the considerations that we have identified through our conversations with the board, the goals that we have, and then really just the background knowledge that we have about things that we know we're going to have to do in the future. So as we build our budget, we want to ensure that our academic programs continue to offer the appropriate rigor for all of our students. We know that a rigorous academic program where students are growing, building, and preparing for high school is at the core of what we do. We want to continue to maintain extracurricular opportunities for all students, regardless of age, ability, ENL status, trying to make sure that we have opportunities that all students can access. We have a continued commitment to all of our safety measures, allowing both students and staff to have a safe place to teach and learn. Over the years, we've made quite a few upgrades around cameras, our telephone system, the vestibules that we added, and then most recently, we've added our CRO. We want to continue to support professional development. Without professional development, we will not continue to move forward in our practice. Ultimately, as an institution, we want to build and grow teachers. We are a people-centered institution, and without growing them, we will become stagnant in the growth that we make. The next one is around collaboration with our local districts to support programs for all learners. We've had some conversations around that. It is no secret that special education placements are incredibly difficult to come by. We have students who are on waiting lists for up to a year at a time. When we don't have placements for them, they're on waiting lists and they get tutored. It's one-on-one tutoring. It's really to help bridge the gap. But that 2-hour or 3-hour tutoring is never meant to be a long-term solution for kids. But locally, there just aren't placements. And we are finding with our local districts, that also seems to be true. So we are trying to work together to see what we can do to build programs. So we can either share programs and send to each other, or build programs that we can have some continuity. One of the things that I know Dr. Wong spoke a lot about last year was we had a K-2 classroom for students with communication disorders, and it ends. So we have a decision to make. We either build a program that they can go into next year, or we have to look for out-of-district placements. And, I think next year we'll be looking for 5 students for an out-of-district placement, and that is just going to be a really heavy lift, and our kids belong with us. They're students who should be within public schools. So looking what we can do to collaborate with, I believe this Board of Lake Green Island and COES to say, what can we do together? We may not have enough kids to have a depth of special education programming like a North Colony or a South Colony, but coming together, we may be able to build programs so that none of us have kids on waiting lists for up to a year. We're going to have to address increases in the retirement system rates, and we can do this possibly with the use of reserves for this purpose. We have reserves set aside for this, and we may need to look at accessing them so we can do the things that we want to continue to do. We're going to have to continue to analyze and review state aid figures. State budget isn't going to, well, hopefully will be adopted by April 1st, right? Like that's always the goal. But our state aid funds came out. We are looking at a reduction in state aid, particularly in the area of foundation aid. Last year was the first year we're at full funding, and we're already looking at a cut. I think that does demonstrate how fragile that aid can be. So while it is hopeful that we'll get back some or all of that money, it's something that we have to take into account and look at and not count on at this point in the budget season. We'll be working to finalize tuition costs for our high schoolers and our out-of-district placements. Those both can be big budget drivers for us. We send about 100 kids out of district. If there's a swing of $1,000, $2,000, $500, that can anywhere be from $50,000 to a $200,000 implication. So we'll be looking at that for tuition, and then our out-of-district students. We do have some students who are served out of district, so we'll be continuing to monitor that and get a sense of where those students will be and the costs that may be associated with the programs that they require. And then last but not least, we will review and finalize our BOCES expenditures. We have done a really nice job of looking at what do we spend through BOCES, what makes sense for us to purchase, where do we not purchase, can we get some additional aid if we go through BOCES. So we'll be taking a look at that, and then also looking at if there's anything that needs to sunset through BOCES. So I'm going to have Joanne talk to you a little bit about the tax cap information and calculation at this point in time. So Joanne, that is for you.
I'm going to stand right here, if that's okay with everybody. Most of you are familiar with the tax cap process and how it works. I'm just going to go over some of the key points today. Right now, the calculation does not include any pilots. I struggled with that. Should I throw it in? Should I take it out? Right now, we're just going to take what we know today. So what you're going to see today does not include a pilot. It applies the tax-based growth factor of 1.008 and a CPI of 2%. CPI is a cost of living index and an increase of what we can do in our calculation. The tax-based growth factor is something we get from the state of New York for real property tax services. And it's an overview of every municipality and school district and their actual growth in bricks and mortar and what the improvements have been. And that's how we have no say in it, we have to take what they give us, and that's what it is right now. The exclusions, and we don't necessarily talk a lot about exclusions, but I thought we would today, and I'll kind of give you a little background into the exclusions. They're the net of our debt service payments, less any aid or any reserve for debt that we use. And it includes exclusions for BOCES capital expense, but I'm going to show you a slide and a couple of slides to explain that a little bit better. And what the exclusions are is that when you do the calculation, you take the exclusions, and that's what you can add back into your calculation. So we're going to go through that in just a smidge more detail today. And currently, there are no additional exclusions for retirement increases. It could change depending on where the finalized interest or employer contribution rates come in. There is legislation that allows the districts, if there's a swing of more than 2% in what we're going to forecast for next year, that the difference between what's over 2% could be used as a exclusion. And right now, there is none. The other side, I think that is crazy, that we have to file our tax cap calculation on March 1st. It just, to me, defies all sense, but we will be ready to submit. And then this is the tax cap calculation itself. You're going to see in the top is the prior year levy. And by levy, I mean that is the actual amount of taxes that we raise. And then you multiply that by the tax-based growth factor, and you add back in your pilot from the previous year. You add back in your prior capital tax levy exclusions, and you come to your adjusted prior tax levy. Then you multiply that by your CPI, you add back in pilots for the coming year. And that's the only one I know of right now. That's the only one that's still on our books. That's the Castleman Electric pilot. And then we have no carryover, and that gives you your limit. So we take that limit of 7.5 million, and then we add back in the exclusions for the coming year, which gets us to $7,851,565. It's about $220,000 over the prior year levy, or 2.89%. And I just thought it would be interesting. Go ahead.
Joanne, for pilots, you said the Castleman one, what about the veterans housing project? Because we know that has already started, or is that not scheduled to come online?
I have gotten no formal paperwork for anything yet, except for the Castleman one. And as soon as they come on, we'll adjust it.
Okay, yeah, that's the only one I know the veterans part of it, because that hasn't been approved, but this one has at least been approved, it didn't know when it was coming online.
I don't have it. Well,
Okay.
but we can do that, and we'll update every year, every time we get look through it.
Okay.
What I think is kind of interesting, every district you work in, this slide looks so much different on how you get to your exclusions. We're a little bit different here in Menands. We don't have a transportation aid exclusion. For any other district that is purchasing buses and there's a capital expense, there would be a deduction there. So the top of the aid right now, the top is $434,000, and you'll see that in the governor's run. That's how much building aid they're forecasting. Then we go down to BOCES rent and capital aid. We have a portion of that BOCES bill that's for debt that we have to pay, so they allow us to net out what the actual cost is after they take away the aid. That happens to be $8,833, again, not a huge amount. And so then you add that up, and then you come into the bottom part, what you see in red there, the $912,000. That includes a band interest payment of $118,000 on the project that we have approved that will be starting in July. We'll be making an interest payment on that next June. So we add that in, and that 912 also includes our existing debt payments, principal and interest. And then, if you remember correctly, in the long-range plan, and when we built the budget, and when we had Jason here, we are going to use some of the debt service money that we have aside to help level that increase on this project that we're doing on the roof, so that that payment stays level for the taxpayer. Not going to be any ups and downs. We're going to use that to help offset that. So while there's debt on it, it's not going to hit the taxpayer because we're going to use the reserves. So then you're going to come down to add everything in, because I do have to add that use of reserves back in because it's money. Then we subtract out your building aid, less everything, and then you the net capital local levy is 343.38, 538. If you go back one slide, that's what we add back in, and it's right here. So I just wanted you to see that. A lot of districts don't get a lot of time to look at that. I just wanted to take time and explain it. So we can keep going. And state aid comparison. I don't know if you want to jump in here, Jen, and explain, or you want to keep going?
So we have 3 columns here for you, and this is, really just to give you a sense of where we've been with proposals versus the actual working formula once it's approved. So this middle column was the budget proposal for this school year, and this is where we actually landed. So this past school year, it wasn't that far off when you look at any of the individual columns. So, it went from, 42,000 to 17,000. Our BOCES aid was about the same. Our high cost excess was up along with our private excess cost. And those numbers are driven by special education and high cost placements.
Yes.
So both of those were up a little bit. But the rest of our aid really was pretty stable. And I say that because I think that's something that we often see. So when we look at our proposal for our executive budget, this is what we are currently looking at. And this is, anytime it's in a parentheses, that's where we're looking at a decrease. And if it's not, we're looking at an increase. So, our foundation aid is down by about $44,000, but our BOCES aid is up by about $64,000. High excess cost is down by $15,000. Again, that's driven by special education placements, so that's not really something that we have a whole lot of control over. Yet we place the kids who are with us in the best programs that we can find. And then the rest of the numbers aren't far off terribly. Our transportation is down a little bit to 28,000. Part of that is we didn't have as many transportation runs when we were looking at special education placements as we had previously. If you remember, we brought some kids back and serviced them here over the summer, and we hadn't done that. Even when we had our self-contained classroom, we didn't necessarily have those kids here with us over the summer. And that is something that we do now. So, we could have had our kids, we might have been sending them to 3 different locations. Now it's one run coming here. And then we also have our, Joanne, could you talk a little bit about the building and building reorg incentive?
That figure, is one of the only stable numbers from the state of New York. They know what our debt service is. So every year our debt service goes down just a smidge. So that's why you'll see some changes in our, the ratio. They look at all of our numbers, our WADA and all those things, what's the percentage of our debt service aid? And that's a really good question, because I'll compare that so people can see that. Did that have an impact on that? Did our ratio go down? Or was it truly just based on the numbers? And I'll be able to follow up. But again, that's something that we have no control over.
Joanne, last but not least, because you did a better job explaining it to me, can you talk a little bit also about the charter school transitional?
Yeah, charter school transitional is, again, another one that you're never going to see on the governor's one. And it has to do with how many kids that we have in charter schools. I don't get along well with all them, although they are really nice people, but we have to do a lot of checking on these people that come through here. We've had a reduction in the number of charter school students that we take for. So I don't have a way to forecast to see if we're going to get that in the following year, but I will be looking at that as well. I think one of the most important things to talk about today as we have this initial discussion is these things we're still going to be looking at. Mr. Evans, Jennifer, and myself, we went to talk to Mr. Steck and Mr. Ashby, and I think that they don't want to see any reductions in the foundation aid. So we are hoping that it truly gets a 3% increase and goes back so nobody has a negative. But a lot of these numbers fluctuate. We could have a tremendous number of students leave our district. We could have a tremendous number of students, and all of these numbers are fluid. That is one of the downsides to the foundation aid formula being in working order. It can fluctuate, but we base everything on what we know now, and we're still in the process of looking at that.
And can I ask you, like the BOCES aid, that's last year's figures, right? Because it's a year lag, right?
That's a very important thing, that some of we talk about expenditure driven aids. Transportation is one, BOCES is one, and some of the software, library, and textbooks are the other. So again, those are aids that we get in the following year based on what we spend. So as we talk about BOCES programming, if we were to reduce BOCES programming quite a bit, then we know that we have a reduction in BOCES aid in that, the next year after that. So we try to keep that in mind as we look at everything.
And then last but not least, Joanne broke out the full day, it's pre-K funding.
Yeah, yes,
On
I'm
the
sorry
bottom.
about that.
It is within the budget to have our pre-K funding continue into next school.
And I have decided to just take it out of the calculation. We don't get to count it in general aid fund, it doesn't get to go towards that revenue figure that we balance the budget in. It's kept in the special aid fund, I'm gonna take it out of any of the figures that you see.
Does it end up though in the total number that we're voting on, the voters vote on?
Now, keep in mind that the voters are voting on spending that revenue, and it does not come into play there. What you see is what the voters vote on, what we're gonna tell them we're gonna spend. And then how we match that with our revenue, and this will not play a piece of that.
Doesn't count toward teacher salary?
Nope, it does not. And keep in mind, we pay a vendor, and it goes to that. So you don't see the expenditure for the pre-K program and what the voters approve, nor do you see that revenue, because it's all done through the special aid fund. Like our grants, all of those are done through special aid, they're not part of this.
So with that backdrop, a couple of things that we're going to face as we take a look at some challenges. First, as you are well versed in, it took us 16 years to realize the full foundation aid formula after it was proposed, and it's been a 4-year phase-in. And Menands was one of the school districts that was the lowest funded. So over the course of the last 4 years, we've been phased in, and we finally last year were at our full foundation aid. Our state budget gap elimination adjustments happened shortly after our foundation aid. That was back in 2012. Right? It was a while back. I think it was Dr. Wong's first budget here. And that was a huge step back.
Can you explain what that is? I don't think I was here during that.
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead, absolutely.
When they started the foundation aid discussion back in 2000, I think it was 11, 12, you're correct. What happened was it was so expensive that the state of New York decided they had to take some of it back. So they proposed a gap elimination adjustment that districts actually had negative amounts in their state aid. And I don't know if you remember, it was just crazy. We went to school after school just as a group of people to try to argue that. And it actually took, I believe, 3 years for it to go away. But it set every district back that had paid all those, they had gotten this money, it was all taken away with no choice, no nothing. It was called the gap elimination adjustment because the state couldn't afford it.
So that was a huge setback for districts. Districts looked at massive cuts. I think at one point in time when I was here, we were looking at a reduction in our library media specialist, our Spanish programming, and elementary classroom. Those cuts were pretty significant. So, and it took some time for districts to be able to recover from that. We didn't have deep cuts, but we definitely were in a very tight financial situation where there was not a lot of room for the extras. There wasn't a lot of room for professional development. There just wasn't a lot of room for much other than keeping who we had, which was the priority at the time. So to be at a place where we have our full foundation aid, it's really going to be a priority for us to advocate and hopefully keep that so that we can continue a lot of the work that we've done. Part of the reason as the COVID relief funds are dropping off, the way we're able to maintain most of our positions was through this increasing foundation aid. So it's important to know, and I think we've learned our lesson in the past with this, that there's never a guarantee that we're going to have increases in foundation aid. And we are hopeful that the hold harmless and the CPI increase will be adjusted for foundation aid. Hold harmless was supposed to be that districts were never in a position where they looked at reductions. And, while some districts, I think some of our local neighbors, their increases weren't as great as they thought they were going to be, we actually wound up with a straight reduction of foundation aid. So that hold harmless piece is going to be important for us, and really just so we don't wind up in that situation. So fund balance, Joanne's gonna talk through this one a little bit for you and talk about where we are with fund balance, where we've been, and give you a little bit of background as we plan for this budget season.
I think, it's always good to keep in mind, and I'm going to show this slide pretty much, I would guess, through every presentation that we do as we build the budget, because fund balance is one of those things that we have to get our heads around and how do we use it. We talked a little bit earlier today about maybe using some of the reserve for ERS and TRS to balance our budget. As you all know, we used $950,000 appropriated revenue right here. This year, we did that because we know we had that expense of $150,000 for the design work. And right now, I'm leaving that all the same as we build our budget. I don't have the actual revenue we're going to balance this budget yet, but we're still in the works of it. But I wanted to show you where we are. 6/30/23, if you come down, we had a $35,000 decrease in fund balance. And fund balance, quite simply, is the money we have at the end of the year. From the previous year, July 30, 22, we had $2.773 million in fund balance, and that means what we used to balance the fund, our revenue, what we used for everything. And then if I take that figure and then whatever we spend in the next year, I subtract it out, and then all the revenue we get, I bring it in. That is our net fund balance. I don't care how we slice it, what's what, how we've used it. That becomes our fund balance. If our revenues are more than our expenditures, that is going to be a positive impact on our fund balance. And if our expenditures are greater than our revenues, it's going to have a negative impact on our fund balance. I just think it's one of those things that's fluid. We talk about it. We adopt a reserve plan every year. We go through this in October, November, December. And I wanted you to see it as we build the budget. I also think it's kind of interesting at the bottom where you look at the total fund balance, and then below that, I've shown if it's been an increase or a decrease. In 2021, you'll see $310,000 increase. And again, that was because of COVID. We didn't spend all the money we had budgeted for. And then at the bottom, the 4% allowable tells you how much of a budget, how much of our expenditures is that allowable 4%. The 4% is the amount of the next year's budget. So when I'm ready to tell the state where we end up, if our budget is $10 million, I know that my 4% is $400,000. That's a small figure. I think this Board of Education has been very good in their use of their reserves and getting their reserves built up, because $400,000 could literally be gone in a minute. If we had 3 high-need students come in that we had to put in tuition school, or if we had some major problem with our facility, it'd be gone. So we have done a phenomenal job putting our reserves away. Now, the trick is we have to answer that every single year to the state of New York, and why are we over 4%? And give you an idea of where we are in that. And ideally, you know, I know this Board of Education said, we're okay with that. We're showing a plan, we're trying to do it. I was happy that it was down $35,000, but, you know, I think we're gonna be careful in that. And you're gonna see me forecast some expenditures as we go through the budget, but I wanted you to see the fund balance right now today. There are no figures in the bottom, Bill, because right now you're gonna see in that last column, I have my expenditures matching my revenue. I didn't want to make any assumptions quite yet.
So before you go, we're going to do questions and discussion, but I know that fund balance is something we talk about quite frequently. Does the board have anything specific to fund balance before we move forward that Joanne can help us out with?
It's one quick thing, and we probably shouldn't even dwell on it because we're only talking about next year. But in the presentation from last time, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name from,
Jason.
yes.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, thank you. It looked not the rosiest picture for like 2 or 3 years down the road. And I'm not worried about it right now, but I will, since we're talking about fund balance, it does show like we're going to be projected to use whatever we've got, you know, going on right now.
That was probably one of the most conservative looks at our spending. I know that, you know, when I make some forecasts for what we're going to spend, chances are we're not going to have those true expenditures, and for some reasons. We're a small district. Now, we are going to continue with our expenditures, but every now and then you'll have a year where you might get somebody that retires. None of that's taken into consideration in any of that. Some of the expenditures that we have, the debt service, that's actually gonna go up, but it's also gonna generate more aid. That was a tough picture to paint. I'm actually sorry I wasn't here in the same breath, I wasn't. But, every school district paints the same picture, and I'm not trying to be contrite when I say that either. We look at the worst possible case scenario, but if we continue building budgets where we look at what we're spending, what our revenue is, and keep in mind, there will be some years where I'm gonna say, look at this, state aid was reduced, we didn't realize that revenue. We're gonna know what that, as we build that budget, okay, well, that would be a negative fixed fund balance. And then what do we need to do as a group to manage that? Do we move it around? Do we take more away? And if we do, we're gonna have to come up with cuts. Jen and I have had discussions before where, what happens if you do have to make a cut? What if there's something this district could do nothing about? The state said we're gonna have another gap elimination adjustment. And we had to cut $400,000. You have to kind of start to plan for that in itself. But yes, it did paint a bleak picture, but that is probably the worst case scenario that you can come up with. And I do think that school districts have to pay attention to their fund balance. But I do honestly feel that our school district is in a decent place. And we'll get to a point where we have to watch it. So let's start it now. So you as a Board of Education, long after I retire, will say, what's our fund balance? So we're like, okay, you're going to kind of know where you are.
Thank you. No, it was just more of a statement, really, that I remember that I'm tying the two things together. And while I still think we're looking very, very good, I just know that it was a couple years away, and it was very aggressive or conservative, so.
Jim and I were looking at other things that we think that will hopefully come to fruition in future years, but you're looking at things that, like health insurance costs and everything. And, we have a contract that's in place right now that will expire in 27. How will that impact everything moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
They take what they know and they paint it, it's conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, I've seen a few of those, and they always look pretty bad far out, which is scary, but it's good to see like what could happen, right? If the increases don't happen, if we don't, we talked before about, it'd be nice to say to our voters, so we're not gonna have a tax increase this year, but it shows what can happen if you do that. Like, it's not very many, you don't get very many years in before you start having to cut programming and do things, so.
I think we're all pretty cognizant of it also, and we're all like, it's not like slipping under the radar or anything. So I'm not really worried. I just felt the need to mention it.
Well, it's important to connect the two presentations because it is if we're not careful, right, that is the potential place where we can be if that's on the forefront of our minds.
You have a bunch of setbacks that stack up.
Yes.
So as we look ahead, today was really to lay the groundwork around some of the work that we are going to be doing and what to expect as we look towards February 12th, which we've started some of that work already. The first being that we will take a look at what would our budget be with a rollover. Take everything that we're doing right now, move that into next school year, and what does that look like with some assumptions. There's things that Joanne's not going to know. She's not going to know healthcare increases. There's going to be things some assumptions that we have to make, but we're going to take all of that, use the best information we have, and look at if we're doing everything that we're doing today, what would that look like for next school year? We will work to update revenues and estimates. We will have a better sense of what we're looking at for tuition costs. We'll have a better sense of what we're looking at for out-of-district placements. Mrs. Frank is currently planning for annual review season. She'll have a better sense as she starts to meet with families. What are we looking at for out-of-district placements? And in that same line, we will have a comprehensive review of our special ed collaboration that we are considering. So Mrs. Frank has been working very closely with our neighboring districts to look at what are the needs, what are the programs we have, and what are the specialties for each district. I am incredibly proud of the program that we have here that serves our kids with communication disorders, whether it be autism or other things that impact their ability to communicate. We have worked very hard to grow that program, build that program, work with curriculum. If I were to say what should be our specialty, I would say that's it. I would also remind you that Mrs. Frank spent many, many years at Wildwood, and that really is her area of specialty even as a leader. So as we talk with the districts, we said, we really are comfortable within that world. We have good programs, good systems, and we work to retain staff that have expertise in that area. Some of our neighboring districts have worked really hard to develop programs for students with behavioral challenges. We don't have those programs in-house. We don't. We do not have programs for students who have social emotional needs. And then one of our other neighboring districts have worked really hard to build programs for kids with cognitive delays. Maybe aren't quite in the need of a communication disorder placement. They don't have a communication disorder, but they have delays that don't allow them to fully participate in general education. So we will continue to work with our neighbors to look at what does that mean. If we send kids out, if we bring kids in, it's an in and out kind of thing that we have to figure out. Joanne is working very hard on some spreadsheets and really trying to figure out what does that look like? How do we cost out our programs? How do we figure out how much it's going to cost for us to send students who may need those programs out of district, but they can still be in a public school. So we'll be working very closely. We're going to come back together early next week, the 6th, and we will have some more information for that, so you'll have a pretty good understanding of what are the possibilities in that area that we may be able to offer programming for our students, and then also have just a working relation with some of our districts. I think we have a couple of students, there's no placements. It's horrible and it's not great. And if there's something that we can do as a group to come together and work together to make something happen, we would really like to be able to do that for our kids. And other districts feel the same way.
We don't currently bring any students in for programming. Other districts have need.
Yeah, so,
No,
we found a lot in these other districts that a lot of them have like the K2 program. One district has a K2 social emotional program, but then it ends. Same like our autism communications program, it just ends, it falls off. So typically in the past, you would see out of district programming at like non-public schools for those kiddos, but to be honest, all of the students in our special class right now are successful in a public school setting, and we really do have to consider the restricted environment when looking out. So the other districts are in very similar situations. We also have a couple of students here who are requiring one-to-one support in the gen ed setting, and technically that's more restricted than a special class setting with less peers and more adult support built in. So those are considerations.
I know we've talked a little bit, we're looking to expand them past 3rd grade for that and keep programming here. So will that tie in then possibly to a building project and with expansion of footprint, adding a classroom where we could bring students from other districts in and consider it a revenue stream?
Are you answering that question?
I'm asking as a statement,
Yeah,
right? I don't know. Are we thinking about any of that, right? Because we're always looking for, I hate to say it, other ways to bring in money that the district needs. But if we're talking about a capital project in that 4-year time, 3-year time, where are we at? 3 years? Something along those lines.
Yeah.
If we added footprint specifically for those needs that other districts have need for, we would then collect tuition, if I understand. So is that an option that we could look at?
So I would say we are planning for K-5 right now. And I will say the proposal that we have in front of us, the seats are already full, meaning that there's a need out there for other districts. The classrooms that we could potentially have here in both sections, those classes, as it stands today, would be full. And we would tuition out some of those seats. And that is, right, like we need a 3 through 5 classroom, no matter what, whether we go into this collaboration or not. So to be able to fill some of those seats, it is a revenue stream, right? And it does offset some of the costs of the district. We are only looking at K-5. If we get to the other end of this and we have it'll be those same 5 kids, right? When they hit 5th grade, if we don't look at an expansion into middle school, then we'll be looking for an out-of-district placement at that time. I think for us, what's going to be most important is let's get them into the 3-5 classroom and let's see how they do. One of the funny things that I will say, at least it was my experience when I was in North County, a lot happens when kids start to enter like teenage, a lot happens with hormones, and a lot can happen internally, which does sometimes require a more specialized setting, or a setting where they are able to access different supports that allow them to prepare for more independent living, project-based, or internship, job site. So that is another step. We'll have to work closely to see if we get there.
But yes, bringing in students from other districts can potentially be a revenue stream. You wanna?
Yeah, I mean, part of I was impressed with it because I'm always one of those people that say, you know, let the business official go because we wanna learn to see how it's all gonna work. And, right now, the way, Jen and Audrey are looking at it with the other superintendents and special ed directors, it would be a revenue stream for us. So what we're trying to do now is to cost out, what do we set our tuition rates at? And as business officials, we're looking at it as a collaboration because we want to base it on what we know in our school and what our tuition would be that we would charge somebody to come here. And you want to make it so, you know, I don't want them to charge us $200,000 and we don't want to charge them. So we're all trying to use the same formula. We're working on it together. I'm very optimistic that it can be a revenue generator, but it's also one of those things that if you do that and a child leaves that district and goes someplace else, it can go with them. But we are going to be able to provide a fair, comprehensive review of where we are. And it would certainly benefit the students that can't be placed if we don't. We're in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. Cahoes, us, nobody has the programming. And together, I think we can impact positively the students that need it the most.
Do we have a space identified for this coming school year if we, okay.
So what we are projecting and planning for, we have the ability to do internally. I mean, there would have to be some shifts in where people are working
And
and
it wouldn't have to be off-site somewhere.
no, it would not be offsite, it would be here at Menands. So, you know, it's a work in progress. We're still working out some of the details and what that means for spaces, classrooms, things of that nature. But we're hopeful over the next week or two as we come back together that we will be able to really have a pretty solid plan in place. I think we've also been working together since November, right? Really to look at what's the need, what do we need to do, what are the steps that we need to take, you know, are there ancillary positions that have to be added? You know, if we bring in more students with autism and communication challenges, we're gonna need more speech, right? We're gonna need other services to go along with that. So, you know, it's just trying to make sure we take a comprehensive look at it. We're not missing things, we're looking at true costs, what would this actually be so that there's no surprises, right? We wanna be really careful in the planning and the.
The only other to add I would throw on that is we're really trying, as we put this all on paper, is that if it's something that we do, and we do have to add staff, it doesn't cost us, we have the revenue to offset it. And that's the most important thing, and it's the most important thing for all of us individually as particular schools. So.
I will say, just to add on the classes that we would feel most comfortable hosting was like autism communications for our classroom. The districts all over the capital region are weekly at a minimum emailing for placement. So I feel like we have the best chance of filling those classrooms, whereas some of the other programs may not be looking to be completely full at other districts. So there's a regional need for sure.
So our budget calendar as it looks coming up, we have our next budget workshop attached to our board meeting, our February board meeting. That'll be 6:30 start time. March 1st is going to be here before we know it, and we'll be working to submit the calculation. We have our next one again, we've been trying to attach them to the board meeting and then put one in between. It'll be the same thing in March, but hopefully by the time we come back on March 25th, that we have a pretty good working understanding on the budget that will go in front of you. We do have the ability to add additional dates if we're going through, things change. We did not put one on February 26th. We left that date open, really to give us some time to really take all the information we have, do a rollover, have your feedback, and then really get down to building a budget for you to take a look at and to provide a lot of feedback on March 11th. We have a budget workshop scheduled for April 22nd, and then there's some dates that go along with that, with our budget hearing landing on May 8th. So those are the dates that were in the calendar from the last board meeting. We will continue to post and we will continue to make them known to the public so that they can attend and be part of the process.
Is the 22nd our board meeting? Do we move April's to coincide with the?
With the BOCES. So the April 22nd date
I have an email, and we were actually just talking about that today.
We were going back and forth.
Our board meeting is on the 24th. I think the way the 22nd falls, we have to have it on the 22nd, but I'm gonna confirm. Because there was something when we built the calendar, and I just couldn't remember off the top of my head tonight. For the 22nd, for some reason, I think we have to have
Dates,
two meetings with the dates the way they roll out.
Yeah.
I will confirm that because it does mean 2 meetings, and I'm pretty sure we talked through this when we met with Frank as we went through the first time. But we were second guessing ourselves tonight as well, so we will look at that to make sure.
I think the Wednesday one is, there was something we had to pass that night. I mean, I guess we could just, and we didn't want to do the budget workshop the same day because we're discussing what we're gonna approve on Wednesday, that's why that was that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, but the OCs.
Yeah.
But, absolutely. So if there's any way to avoid having us in Monday and Wednesday, we will work to do that. But I think for some reason we have to schedule it just the way it fell this year.
There's also a big gap though between March 25th and April 22nd, so if we have the need to have another workshop, we do have plenty of time in the calendar to do it.
Yes. And that was part of our planning, was to make sure that even though there were gaps, that was the ability we needed to add a date. So we have some space in there in 2 different spots if we need to add a date. I believe we had one additional budget workshop that we had last year, and we did that intentionally, just being our first year together going through this process with you. And then also leave some wiggle room to make sure if we need to add a date as we go through as well. So at this point in time, I think what Joanne and I were hoping was to hear from the board about questions, discussion. This will be our first budget season going through with you. What are things that are important to you to learn as we go through our next couple of budget presentations, things that have worked for you historically, maybe places where you hope for more detail. So, and quite often questions and discussion about the information that you learned tonight.
I like that, great preliminary introduction, that was fantastic. In the past, we have the budget presentations have been fairly general, the numbers, like much less general than, Joanne's been giving us a lot more detail in her reporting monthly throughout the year. And I don't know if we need to get into like nitty gritty level of detail for next year, but just, if there are big changes from what this year was, where we're working with those. So, I think we vote on, what is it, like administrative, there's like this categories, right? But I think that's as detailed as our
Program
budget.
administration and capital, and
Right.
thinking if we show it like that in every presentation we do, it would be helpful.
Right, yes, I agree. And then, like I said, if there's anything within those categories that is a large change or, from this year's budget, what those are, and why we're making those decisions. Anything specific they want to see in upcoming presentations?
No,
Okay.
I've been to a few, so.
Okay.
Yes. I think what is most important is that if there are things that we are not providing enough detail on, if there are things that you have questions about, let us know. This past round, we looked at historically what has been presented to the board. We looked at what other districts present in their first round budget presentations, and we tried to take both of those and put together a presentation of a little bit of what we've had, and then a little bit of what your colleagues across the capital district may get in their budget presentations as well. And that's really been the approach that we've taken and we plan to take. So I think, if we start to veer a little bit and we're like, well, we don't need as much of that, but we want more of this, please let us know. Because ultimately we want to put you in a position that you understand the budget so that you can make the best decisions possible as we build a budget and plan for next year. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the extra step to look at whether districts are trying to do this.
John, is there anything else that you would add?
No, I wouldn't. I think you'll see it in a different format. I'm used to getting a lot So I'm trying not to give a lot and just give a little bit more so we can speak to the areas within each one of those components. That if it's contractual and administration, well, what drove that change? I think those are the kind of basics, and that's how I'm kind of used to showing it. So we'll, together, I think we're really trying hard to offer a little bit more information, not quite as much, less words, more numbers. I think it's nice. But we are truly, if it's too much or too little, we'll change it.
That is what we have for this evening. I want to thank Joanne. She is building a budget with the first year superintendent, and I asked a lot of questions, and she gives me a lot of time to thank you. And sure, she makes revisions for me like you would not believe very quickly. So, you know, Commissioner Woodman, I appreciate your support, and I would say, you know, the special ed collaboration that we're working on, are just going to continue to work with me. It's a big undertaking. It feels a little bit like when we opened the classroom the first time around. But really, it's important work to do, and it's work to see that we can hopefully provide programming for kids who may go without otherwise. So we look forward to that work, and hopefully we can find a way to make that happen in a way that works for families, works for the school, and you create some opportunities that they may not otherwise have.
Or even more overlooked than before because you're dealing with other districts.
Yes.
that might not- You know, they don't have necessarily the same priorities that we have, you know. It's possible.
Absolutely.
So,
So I think that concludes our budget workshop for tonight. We look forward to having everybody back on the 12th. We'll do a 6:30 start with our board meeting and our budget workshop. And you will be getting a lot of information over this, because you'll get budget stuff and you're going to get board event stuff. So we will be working hard to even, I know we've been getting materials prior to Liz only doing our district clerk. We're trying to get them to on Thursday. We're going to even try to push them a little bit sooner because there will be quite a bit there to review. So we'll get information out to you as quickly as we can.
trying to remember the schedule pre-board. We always end up remembering when
Yeah.
you're last minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.